At 2:14 a.m., my phone vibrated with 3 alerts that shouldn't have arrived in the same minute. Buncombe County's e-recording portal emailed a successful submission for a quitclaim deed with my typed name. First Citizens Bank flight to $7,500 cashier's check withdrawn from our joint account at the Merriman Avenue branch, and our ring floodlight cam in the carport burst a clip of my wife carrying down a disassembled crib we stored in the attic. I blinked at the bright images of wood slats against her scrubs and the timestamp on the bank notice like someone had learned to counterfeit my life. A fourth alert landed while I was still trying to sit up. Live 360 showed her phone pinging not Mission Hospital, where she said she'd been called in for a double, but in the parking lot of the Red Lantern Motor Lodge off Hendersonville Road, 3 miles away and almost under the flight path. I lay there with the blanket bunched in my hand while the house exhaled the night, and I understood in a cold, practical way that I was about to have to become the kind of person who prints things. We live in West Asheville, in a 1920s bungalow with a deep porch and a narrow driveway that makes neighbours polite. The kitchen has been updated 3 owners too many times, so the backsplash is ambitious and the cabinets sigh. My office is half the dining room, because my job includes boxes. I refinish wood floors and sell reclaimed hardware all under a name my sister says sounds like a breakfast cereal. Most days I'm in other people's houses with a drum sander and knee pads. On calmer days I ship brass pin pulls and old enamel numbers to strangers who think they're buying a story as well as an object. My wife, Mara, is an ER nurse at Mission, good at the parts of life the rest of us fumble. She can find a vein no one else sees and talk a drunk into sitting quietly until the attending shows up. She wears her hair in a low bun that says "Not today" to the world. We have one kid, a 7-year-old son who believes the best place to catch crawdads is where the French Broad River smooths out near Carrier Park, and that cardinals take turns watching him ride his bike. He owns 2 helmets and wears neither without prompting. His school is in the River Arts District, the kind of public charter that smells like temper paint and 8th grade ambition. Money is what it always is when you know the names of 3 separate types of polyurethane and your wife counts her shits by the mile marker of sleeplessness. Present, insufficient, waiting to turn into crisis at the wrong moment. I keep a running ledger for the business on a legal pad because the software feels like a request I can't quite meet, and we are paying off a colonoscopy I avoided too long because an uncle died young and it left a murky stain on me I didn't want to investigate. The roof has a soft spot I pretend is character and the Outback whistles in 2nd gear. When I scroll back mentally, the red flags didn't march, they drifted into the room like dust. Mara's scrubs started smelling like smoke wood cologne that didn't match anything on our dresser. A new key on our hook carried a rubber tag stamped 3C. She said it was for a medication cabinet because the hospital had tightened up protocols. DoorDash receipts landed for places we never ate, all timed for between 1:30 and 2:15 a.m. Pad Thai from Me's, cheeseburgers from 5 Points. The passenger seat in the Outback slid 2 notches back and the mirrors held their positions like the car had learned a second driver's face. A Visa with the last 4,821 paid for 2 subscription services that sounded like transit cards, Lift Lane and City Pass, and the bank said the card had been added by a household manager called M. We are both M. I told myself dispatch-style ships can warp any fiction into plausibility. Sometimes ER nights go still, sometimes they explode. Mara switched partners on short notice for overtime offers that looked like little lifeboats in weeks when my invoices stacked like pancakes nobody asked for. She started leaving for work 15 minutes earlier and returning with a look that combined adrenaline and mourning. She slept later on post-nights and left oatmeal bowls unsoaked in the sink because all exhaustion is the same end. When she laughed at home, it sounded like a person who'd forgotten where she put the thing that used to make her laugh. The night of the alerts, I slid the crib pieces back into the attic after she left the carport. The wood felt familiar in my hands and wrong against the air. I sat at the table and pulled the ring clip to my laptop, then logged into Buncombe County's register of deeds like men in movies who know how to do this. The e-recording entry listed the submitter's Blue Ridge Title Services, with a dot number and the name of a notary I didn't recognize. The quitclaim transferred my interest in our house tomorrow, to perfect title into the grantee for purposes of lending. My handwriting, which looks like a tired person picking up sticks, had never touched those lines. Next to it sat a neat, round version of my name, like it had been tutored to behave. I called First Citizens Bank because adrenaline likes a task. The nighttime fraud agent assigned a case number FCB-76112 and read me the branch address and time stamp 10:02 p.m. Teller line 3, cashier's check number 220,895. I pictured a row of fluorescent lights in the close quiet of a nearly shut bank, a transaction that would play forever on a camera above a plastic pen tethered to its mount. Life 360 update. Red lantern lot again, a pinch of a blue dot in a sea of gravel. I didn't call my wife. What would I say to a person who walked through doors I wasn't allowed to name? In the morning, I drove to the Merriman branch with my official face on and asked the manager whether a check like that can be cancelled if it was flashed for fraud. She said if it had been made out to a title company, it would either be deposited or returned. If it had been made to cash, it was gone and I'd need to open a claim. She handed me a brochure that had been printed to make people feel calmer about things that should make them loud. I filed the claim because quiet men with evidence make better witnesses than loud men with none. I opened a separate checking account at Self-Help Credit Union on Patton Avenue and moved my business deposits there, including the backlog of Etsy payouts. I had always let full likes know into the joint account because trust had felt swag enough. I froze our headlock with Home Trust Bank and wrote the freeze confirmation number HGB-44,190 on a sticky note I stuck to a microwave like a hostage demand. That afternoon, I called Blue Ridge Title. The receptionist used a tone like marble when she said they could not discuss client files, then softened when I said I had received an e-recording confirmation for a quitclaim with my signature and I had not, in fact, signed anything. She transferred me and a man with a lawyer's voice said I should come in with ID. He would meet me with the notary and the file. He sounded like a person who spends morning coffee reminding himself that paperwork is only dangerous when it becomes understood. I dressed like respect and drove to their office on Biltmore Avenue, a brick building with a parking lot that seemed to know the term client. The notary slid a copy of the signature page to me and I teleported briefly to a space where paper is a country with its own gravity. The loop in the G on my last name had been domesticated into a circle. The notary said the signer presented a driver's license with my number and address, and they had recorded the transaction over a disk cam that timestamps like a body cam in a procedural drama. He printed a still, my wife in a bowl cap and a mask, holding up a license. The attorney said it looked like a person presenting on behalf of someone for a closing, which happens sometimes when a spouse can't be present. He wanted me to know no one at his office meant me harm. He gave me a letter on letterhead stating the signature did not match my in-person sample, and he offered to contact the county to flag the deed as suspect. I took the letter and then went to sit in my car where my throat remembered had to be an organ. The first reveal felt definitive. It wasn't. I wanted to believe a clever stranger had learned my name and my house just well enough to aim a professional act at it. The truth kept cracking off sharp edges. The following evening, I printed our ADT logs. At 1:48 a.m., front door latch sensor disabled by user code 2. That code is Morris -4. At 2:03 a.m., the garage door opened by remote. The Ring camera recorded a second clip. A man's backloading a folded-up pack and play into the outback. I didn't recognize the back exactly, but the shoulders sat under a jacket I've seen at the hospital gift shop, the kind with a stitched mountain logo. The car left for 23 minutes and returned empty. The Life 360 tray showed Morris phone traveling from the carport to the Red Lantern and then back to Mission. She arrived at the ER lot at 2:44 a.m. and clocked in a 3-2 according to HR email I received later after I wrote to the scheduling coordinator and asked for a copy of the audit my wife said she'd been pulled into. The coordinator said such records weren't typically for spouses, then CC'd the union rep and attached a CSV titled Late Night Overtime Variance. The entry for Mara's ID showed exits and re-entries that read like Morse code. 137 exit, 2 re-entry. The union rep suggested I speak to my wife. Money tightened the screws the way money loves to. The $7,500 check cleared 2 days later, payable to Sunrise Storage. I called Sunrise's office on the edge of the River Arts District and asked whether a unit in our names existed. The manager said she couldn't give me a unit number, then suggested that if I already knew the number perhaps we could discuss whether the lock had been changed. I had no number. She paused and asked if the key had a rubber tag stamped 3C. I said yes, gambling that night's rubber tag had been more than a prop. She said a Fireson unit had been paid for under an autopay with a 4,821 card, and the gate log showed entrances at 2 a.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays for the past month. She told me to bring my driver's license if I wanted to add my name to the account. The way she threaded legality and human sympathy made me want to sit in the lobby and hold a support group for people who discovered their lives in off-site units. I didn't go to Samwise storage that day. I went to school pickup instead, small hands and backpacks making rational thought wait. The public scene arrived when I hadn't planned it. Miss Kenna, the front office ninja who runs the school like a train conductor who hates delay, flagged me down. She said they had received a new approved pickup list for our son that ended in Aaron L, with the relationship field filled by the word aunt and the local number. Another name had been added under emergency contact, Dan, with a different last name than ours. The email arrived from Mara's school account at 9:05 a.m. I asked Miss Kenna not to release my son to anyone not already on the list. She nodded and asked if I wanted her to print the email and the screenshot of the forms for my records. I did. She added that she had seen my wife the morning drop off our son with a folded stroller in the trunk and a stranger in the passenger seat. She had assumed it was a visiting relative. Her brows worked to stay in their polite place. I stood next to the attendant's clipboard and opened my expanding file folder with the elastic strap and placed 6 sheets on the office counter. The Blue Ridge title letter about the forged signature, the cashier's check image, the ADT code log, the ring stills, the Life 360 trace, and the printed email showing added pickup names. I told Miss Kenna that if someone came to collect my son under any name not already in his file, the school should call the police and then me, in that order. I gave them a letter from my lawyer, who I called from the parking lot, naming temporary custody concerns and referencing case number BR-20242, a document with enough official phrases to make an impression. Another parent, a guy in a work boot worship tee, read the ring stills upside down and muttered the word ugly in a voice I pretended not to hear. Public pressure flash, a quick, mean light. I felt small and also like a person who had started building a spine out of paper. Reveal number 2 waited at Sunrise storage like a stagehand behind the curtain ready to tap the actor. The manager, her name tag said Dylan, and she wore the kind of perfect eyeliner that makes you feel like standards exist, added me to the account and opened the unit. The smell that rushed out was baby powder sweet under the metallic odor of Lux and dust. A folded crib leaned against one wall. A box labelled Mara call room held 2 sets of scrubs, a pair of fuzzy socks, and a travel toothbrush. A Medela box sat unopened next to a stack of new onesies in gender-neutral colours and a package receipt from a big box baby store in Greenville, South Carolina, paid with a card ending 4821, local store address printed in clean type. There was also a battered banker's box with a Sharpie label that said taxes 2017-2021, one of my handwriting quirks, as I print my 7s with a slasher box I had believed lost in our move. Inside, on top, sat a note from a CPA naming an appointment day from 2 years back and a typed name I recognized, Dan Lexton. I had never met Dan. I had seen his name earlier that day in a school emergency contact. He had signed the CPA engagement letter next to my wife's household member. I pulled my phone and took photos of everything like a person who will later argue with himself about whether he is inventing his own evidence. I texted my lawyer to ask about the legality of what I had done standing in a storage unit that smelled like the future. She wrote back with 3 sentences and 2 case citations and told me to stop taking things out and leave after documenting. She said the combination of the forged deed letter and the storage unit contents spoke to intent if we ended up in court. Intent is the legal system's favourite 3-syllable word. The money tightened again. 2 days later, a bill came from Asheville OBGYN with a code that translates as established patient prenatal intake, insurance on file listed as our family plan. I thought of my wife's face the first time we learned our kid had a peanut allergy and how her jaw set like a bridge. I thought of the Oniankapun coffee we used to drink late after her shifts when she tried to convert me to her nocturnal watch, and how sometimes she held her belly like an empty room she imagined furniture for. I wanted to vomit and sleep, and also to fill a spreadsheet until my feelings found a box to sit in. Would you demand a DNA test on the spot, chain of custody, and legal letterhead? Knowing your son watches everything in our house as a gallery of small echoes. Would you hold the test like a threat until you had to use it? Because sometimes the knowledge itself becomes a kind of weapon no one should own. I scheduled our paternity test anyway. Not because math would change my love for 7-year-old who believes the moon leans when he leans, but because I could no longer survive in rhetorical space. LabCorp on Hendersonville Road reserved us for Tuesday 3 p.m. Case number LC-11891, chain of custody required. I printed the confirmation, put it under a magnet shaped like a pickle in the fridge, and sent Mara a link with the date and time. I wrote in my email that I wasn't interested in public scenes, but that I couldn't live inside guesswork. I also wrote that if she didn't show, I would interpret the absence as a statement and proceed with a custody motion. Paper is such a clean language when you sit with it long enough. Reveal 3 hit on a Sunday afternoon in a place that pretends to be about sports. At our son's soccer awards picnic in Carrier Park, I waited until the cupcakes and participation medals had done their job, and then I asked our coach, the type of dad who owns a whistle and uses it, if I could borrow 5 minutes under the pavilion. Parents gathered, some with folding chairs, some with the tired posture of people who understand weekends are just weekdays with less access to coffee. I held up my blue folder and said my son was not to be released to anyone other than the names already on file. I said someone had been added without my knowledge and that person's name was Dan. A woman near the cooler said she knew Dan from the home improvement store on Smoky Park Highway. He ordered custom dolls and once came in with a very pregnant partner who wore a hospital badge and looked like she lived elsewhere places too. The coach nodded at her light nod at a witness she didn't pay for. When Mara drifted into the pavilion late, sunbright on her arms, I set the forged deed letter on the picnic table where she could see it, followed by the cashier's check image, followed by the storage unit photos. No one said a word. Silence thickened in the shade like a cloud. Mara looked at the papers like they had betrayed her by existing. Later that night, a screenshot landed in my email from a manager at Mission, an independent witness delivered via corporate compliance. The manager said HR had reviewed badge traffic for a group of employees during a small audit concerning meal breaks, and my wife's entry showed she had left the property 3 times during a shift the prior week. The manager did not draw conclusions. She attached a statement of policy highlighted. She also wrote that she hoped my family was well, and then apologized for sending something so personal via something so impersonal. I stared at her signature block with the little mountain icon and the phone extension that would reach her if I needed to be brave. Fourth reveal wasn't supposed to belong to me. It was supposed to belong to a person who likes to check mail. ASP's informed delivery digest showed a change of address confirmation addressed to me, and my wife forwarded to a P.O. box near Fairview Road. It also showed a postcard from a fertility clinic in Greenville, the kind with a bland, hopeful logo. I drove past the box location and watched a man in a grey cap retrieve a stack of envelopes with my last name printed on them and slip them into a reusable grocery bag. He walked to a dusty Tacoma with out-of-state tags. I wrote down the plate number on an envelope in my glove box that still smelled like adhesive. I did not confront him because I am not built for parking lot theatre. By then the house had started to feel like a person I didn't trust. I changed the codes on the ADT panel on the My Garage app. I upgraded my Ring account to a plan that stores video for 60 days and saved everything to an external drive because redundant copies make me feel like I'm doing something while life does something else. I froze the 4,821 card after calling Visa and asking how our household manager could add a person without my signature. They said because both of us are authorized administrators. The app allowed it. I opened a separate PO box for business mail so invoices wouldn't vanish into a space I couldn't see. I sent a certified letter to Blue Ridge Title revoking any authority I supposedly granted via the forged quitclaim, and I filed a fraudulent instrument notice with the county BUN-90,971. The clerk at the Register of Deeds spoke to me on the phone with a calm that made me want to apologize for needing calm. On the day of the LabCorp appointment, Mara did not show. She texted a paragraph that said I had made our son into a project that we had discussed adding to our family months ago and I had withdrawn, and that life sometimes goes on sideways when you think you are walking straight. She used the word exhausted twice and reminded me that her job asked of her things I didn't understand. I stared at the green typing dots and thought about the first time I watched her wrap a blood pressure cuff around a screaming toddler and smile with only her eyes, and how I thought I was witnessing a superpower. I printed her text and put it in the folder because my life had become a folder and I hoped someday a judge would be impressed by my printer. My sister, who owns a bakery on Haywood and thinks sugar is a sacrament, asked me flat out whether I wanted our marriage to survive if I excised all the secrets. I told her I wanted to stop living like a man who had to deduce his own address. She said that sounded dignified. She dropped off a box of scones I didn't want and told me to feed myself even if I couldn't swallow. She had the good grace not to ask about the crib. I hired a lawyer who bills in 15-minute increments that show up on invoices like a rebuke. She filed for a temporary parenting plan with explicit exchanges in public locations, Case number DR-31,788. I moved to flag any attempt to sell or mortgage the house without mutual signatures. She drafted a notice to the school describing custody concerns and authorized pick-up lists and the requirement that both parents consent in writing to changes. She CC'd me and the principal in a mess, kinda entitled it Emergency Protocol Child's Name. She recommended I press charges on the forged deed notary if the DA saw a path, because the fear of a misdemeanor sometimes clarifies priorities. I worried about Mara's license, her job, the chain of things that would fall if I pulled the wrong thread. The lawyer asked me to prioritize the roof my son sleeps under. Priorities are rude when they're correct. We met with a social worker through the court's family program. She had the kind of shoulders that say people have cried in this office enough already. She asked us ungentle questions about who picks him up and what he likes about soccer. He said the snacks from when the wind is behind you. She noted that he seemed stable but observant. She told us not to introduce new aunts and uncles until the ink dried on whatever we were writing. She looked at both of us and held eye contact like a witness or a saint. Mara moved into a one-bedroom over a Pilate studio in Biltmore Village, the kind with a balcony that faces a parking lot and tries to pretend it's a piazza. She started parking me out back there on nights she didn't work, and I learned the difference between a car that returns and a car that parks somewhere else and calls it resting. When she had our son, she sent me photos of playground slides and pizza slices held up like trophies. She paid for new cleats. She joined a Facebook group for single moms in Asheville and asked about childcare swaps and posted a photo of herself painting a dresser a cheerful colour I couldn't bring my eyes to like. She wore the kind of smile that looks rented. The independent witness who finally snapped the line between guess and proof arrived in the form of a neighbour who runs the register at the River Arts Co-op and the morning running club with equal vigour. He knocked at dusk with his windbreaker half-zipped and said he had seen Mara and a man he later recognised as download a rocking chair into the back of the Tacoma 2 nights earlier. He said they had done it silently, with a care that looked like rehearsal. He said he hesitated to tell me because people's households are their own business until they are not. He also said he had once watched his father sneak a second family into a new apartment, and he had promised himself, privately, that he would not let neighbours drown in polite water. He left quickly. I sat with his words like they were good tools that wouldn't fix my dope but might make me less crazy trying. I filed a police report about the forged deed. The officer at the desk typed with the methodical rhythm of a person who has learned not to telegraph their judgments. He assigned a number MPD-66109 and told me to keep copies of everything and not to sign anything else until my lawyer read it. I realized, as he spoke, that I had become a person who exists in case numbers and 8.511 narratives. The way he handed me the receipt made me like him more than I like most Saturdays. After months of living in the engine of this thing, the aftermath is not a word I deserve to use yet. The legal pieces are ongoing. The custody exchange happens at the parking lot beside Asheville Community Theatre, where enough people witness enough small readers of plays that no one tries a scene of their own. Our son is fine in the way kids are fine until they aren't. He asks whether home is a person or a house, and I say both, then change the subject to pancakes. I sleep on the right side of the bed because that's where I slept before all this, and claiming continuity feels like a normal person's superstition. I have not decided whether to forgive, because forgiveness feels like a check someone keeps trying to deposit before payday. Sometimes at 2:14 a.m., my body wakes me with a pale imitation of that first shock, like my brain checks the locks on the story to make sure it still happened. I lie there and listen as the ring camera's infrared throws its invisible net over the carport. The house clicks and yawns like it's been awake longer than it planned. I picture the Quitclaim deed floating like a thin, fraudulent kite over my roof, the cashier's check crumpled into the pocket of a jacket in some other closet, the crib slats leaning quietly against the storage unit wall that holds more hope than it knows what to do with. I see the red lantern sign blinking against the darkness, red washing the gravel lot like a warning that doesn't know how to become anything else. On good nights I walk into the kitchen and pour a glass of water, and stand by the sink where morning has the decency to arrive eventually. I think about the first time Mara and I drove back roads out past Bent Creek just to feel like a story starting, and how we believed we would be the exception to entropy if we tried hard enough. I think about the manager at Sunrise Storage, eyeliner perfect, opening a door on a unit that contained, in a compact and terrible way, the missing chapters of my life. I think about the social worker's shoulders and how they bore the weight of other people's forks in the road. Would you cut the rope and let the other boat drift, hoping the current knows better than you do? Or would you tie it tighter, insist on a test, a line item, a notarized truth that can be filed and looked at by strangers who will decide where your son keeps his sneakers. I have chosen, so far, to hold the rope but not to pull. I am learning how to make the house my own again without erasing the parts of us that built it. I keep the expanding file in a drawer because if I leave it on the table the day never ends. I added a second deadbolt to the front door and labeled the keys by colour like a person who believes in systems. I'm back on job site sanding other people's floors, letting the drum's steady growl remind me that some damage can be smoothed if you're patient and don't push too hard in one place. The haunted image I carry into this new version of my life is small and mean and honest. A pause ring clip at 2:14 a.m. My wife's hands at the edge of our carport, wood slats catching a slice of light, the shadow of a man's shoulder behind her, the tiny floating icons on my phone that say someone somewhere press submit, approved, cleared. The camera's red eye dot glows like all watchful, unblinking pupil. The house inhales, the night holds its breath, and my name sits on a line it did not sign. In the held breath I feel both the ruin and the rightness of choosing paper over panic. I tuck the blanket under my feet and let the heater click. Then, because the morning will come whether I am good at it or not, I wait for the first bird to start, and I tell myself that not all signatures have to be written to be real.